He forced me to do it. I'd like to start off with who I am and how I got to having such an interest in health. When I graduated from high school and I went to college, I decided to major in sociology because I had an idea in my head that I was going to do social medicine. And so I got my degree, and then I went to work for a relative who worked was a pediatrician and had a medical office. And as I was working there, I decided that I didn't think I wanted to do medical school, but I did want to do medicine. So I became a physician assistant, and I began to work in medicine. But as I began to work in medicine in the field of pediatrics, I saw that in order to get people to put into practice what I wanted them to do and to maintain it, there was a spiritual component. So it took me 17 years to figure that out, and I figured it out, and by that time I was in ministry, and then I left medicine and I went to social work. And then in social work, I found that I could do that work, and there were a lot of health concerns there, particularly mental health concerns, but I still needed that spiritual component. So finally God said, now you've got it, and I became the pastor of a church. So it was very natural when I became the pastor of the church to have a major component of the work that I do focused on mind, body, and spirit. And so in our church, we bring those things together in an integrated fashion, helping people use their spiritual knowledge, the wisdom, the understanding, the inspiration that they have, and apply that to good health practices. And it's very interesting. We've done a lot of different things. We've worked with Fame Corporation, Body and Soul, and so on the fourth Sunday we have what we call our Health and Wellness Sunday. And on that Sunday, we all come casual. From the pulpit to the ushers, we wear our sweats. And for our morning praise and worship, we do aerobic exercise. And after church, we go on a walk in the community, which has more than one benefit. It has a benefit for us, but also a benefit for the community. In addition to that, we have a health minister, and he sees to it that we have exercise classes that are held at the church twice a week, where people can come who aren't able to afford to join a gym, and they can still do exercise. And he does exercise for everyone. He does chair exercises for those who have mobility challenges, and he does full-out exercises for those who are more mobile. In addition to that, we've done programs like an obesity prevention initiative, where we were able to choose people who were suffering from obesity and other health problems in our church to give them a 5-fold program that helped them deal with those things. We do blood pressure checks twice a month after service, and so we just try to bring the things to people. The biggest challenge has been, in our church, the nutrition piece. Because it's hard to tell black folk you can't have fried chicken. That doesn't go over so well. But in working on it over the past 7 years, we've reached a happy medium. We have a caterer at our church who is a world-class chef, and he has shown us how to eat healthy and it still tastes good. We've done, tried to put in place some cooking classes. So we've done a variety of things in our church to promote health and wellness, and for the most part, it's pretty well received.
Thank you. My name is Frank Alton, and I'm a native of Los Angeles, and health and healing wasn't really a part of my early concern, certainly in the physical sense, but I think in the overall and body, mind, and emotional and spiritual and relational healing, it's been a part of my ministry since early on. I believe that as we become healthy individuals, we are able to create just communities in our churches, in our neighborhoods, and that has to do with emotional, relational, and physical health, and they're all related. But then in 2000, in the year 2000, I kind of accidentally, when I had some lower back pain and went to a Chinese healer, learned that this person did some broader kinds of healing work, and I opened myself to that, and it really led to this journey that led me to start doing yoga, and then I took a sabbatical from my church to study body-mind healing, came back and we started a healing center at the congregation that I was serving at the time, which is now in about its 10th year. And that was working on both from a parish nurse reality to yoga classes, to massage, to Tai Chi, to all kinds of body-mind focus. And in the last 2 years that I've been at the congregation in Echo Park, I'm grateful because we had the privilege of being one of the first congregations working with the Seeds of Hope program that you heard about from Bishop Bruno and Tim. And that sort of opened some doors into a community that wasn't really thinking about health very much. And so we signed on to a healthy eating initiative, and it's been more a signing on than a complete reality in our experience as a community. But it's something that's out there for us to move toward and that we can appeal to say, we need to get on board with this. We've also been able to start with some nutrition classes. We have a breakfast every week in our congregation. It's a fundraiser for an annual retreat that we have. But that has given us a place, a context, where we can talk about nutrition and healthy eating. And if black folks have a hard time giving up fried chicken, our community has a hard time giving up fried tacos. And so it's the same struggle. And to come up with healthy alternatives that are also good, because our committee wants to raise money and they actually want people to buy their breakfasts. And if they don't have stuff that's good, they won't do that. And so we had just recently a Sunday where the folks from Seeds of Hope came and worked with the team of people preparing breakfast that day and prepared a delicious, healthy breakfast. I've met with resistance on the committee over the last year and a half of trying to implement this, but that Sunday, people had both and said, you know, this really is possible. People came back and bought seconds. And so there really was a good feeling. So we have some options there. And we've also started with Jubilee Consortium, some exercise classes. And I'll talk a little bit later about the ups and downs of that, because Tim mentioned that we should mention landmines. I'll talk about the landmines because a lot have exploded in my face over the last 2 years, and so, I'll let the other pastors introduce themselves, and then we can get to some of that.
Pastor Downs.
Good evening, everyone. Daryl Downs from Palmdale, California. I'm here on behalf of Trish, Antelope Valley Partners for Health. They came to our church approximately a year ago, and they were working off a grant from the LA County Department of Health to do education classes in our community, as she stated. Our community is one of the worst as far as health goes in Los Angeles County. As a new pastor of a church that had just merged, I was predominantly African-American church, Church of God in Christ, merged with a Reformed church, and it caused a major shock in our community, in our congregation. So I figured I'd just ride the wave and just start the community garden off the shock value. True story. Actually, it didn't go over very well at all. I was many days out there working myself. But Antelope Valley Partners for Health came and bought some corporate sponsors, they came and bought some volunteers. Next thing you know, children start showing up out of the local community. We had some corporate sponsors come on board and help us out. We have approximately 2 acres of land there that was just not being utilized at all. And so as an outreach portion of our church, and as a way to flag the community and let them know new things were going on, we started the community garden. And as such, I was working it, and I got sick, had bronchitis, and went down for about a month. And a gentleman showed up and just started working the garden by himself. While I was gone for about a month, and come to find out that he was taking all the produce from the garden and taking it over to the local senior citizen community and feeding the senior citizens in the Palmdale area. And when I came back, I was looking around to see who had been working the garden. Met the gentleman, and he told me that he had an ulterior motive, that because he was a senior, didn't have the financial resources to supplement his diet, that he wanted to know, was it okay if he can grab a portion of land and grow some produce for himself. So I gave him the entire 2 acres, told him to go for it, feed the community, and as such, it's just been a great blessing for us.
Good morning, everyone. Pastor Seth Pickens. In 2009, I was called and elected to pastor a church in South LA, and when I got there, one of the things that is wonderful about the facility is that it has a full gymnasium inside the church. The only problem was that it had been, padlocked for about 20 years, except for setting up tables and chairs in there to, eat. But it had not been used as a gym in, over a generation. So when I came, and part of what, I was mandated to do coming was that the congregation was getting older and there was a need to change and, 21st century and all of that. So we started just opening it up to the community for basketball a couple days a week. And a lot of men and women began to come in. From there, a member of the church. And so this is just part of the, the mandate to use the building to its fullest, and also the importance of, I think everybody here is aware of the importance and the connection between physical, mental, spiritual health. So started with the basketball, then from there, there's a member of the church who is a trainer and just wanted to have an exercise class a couple of days a week. So, very welcome, opened the door for that, and that's been going consistently for 4 years. He's very consistent, and he's up to 3 days a week. And then just making the building available. Zumba instructor has come, yoga instructor, boxing instructor, we'll do outings, roller skating, just, as kind of trips and fun things we can do. I don't know if you heard of Rick Warren's newest book, The Daniel Plan, but it's an excellent 40-day journey where they're focusing on, fitness, food, faith, as well as your relationships. And so we did that last Lent. A nutrition ministry has started. There's another gentleman by the name of Jerry Anderson who calls himself the health guru, but he gives an excellent talk and has a lot of resources. I could connect anyone to him. And just making it a part of the culture. The most recent thing, unfortunately, there was a young man who was killed in a hit and run about a block from the church about a year and a half ago. And so as the community came together, we have one of these alleys. It was an alley, and the city tried to turn it into park space. And so they did that maybe 10, 15 years ago, but now even that is overgrown and not much going on there. So we are working now very closely with Body and Soul and with our own community to turn that space into a garden, and it'll be named in honor of that young man who was killed. But so to have it as a community garden, so we have the youth working, we have neighbors working, as well as church members. So those are some of the things that are going on now.
I'm curious to know, of all the initiatives that you all are involved in at your churches, to what extent do you feel like you have initiated, led those, and needed to create momentum, or to what extent have you had folks within the congregation either take the initiative and lead, or be very willing to come along behind? Has it been a challenge for you to create these initiatives, or have they sort of formed themselves? I wonder what it's been like for you in each of your places.
Well, I was blessed to have someone in our church who actually has so much passion for health and wellness that he became a personal trainer in the midst of our 7 years so that he could lead the charge. But there are we have nurses in our congregation also that were willing to step up. And so the biggest challenge for me at that point in my life was to make sure that I was a good role model leader. And so when they're asking the congregation to go on the walks, when they're asking the congregation to exercise, when they're asking the congregation to eat right, to make sure that I was a role model for that. And because of that, I've become much more fit. And so I was just blessed to have people who were willing to share the yoke with me, because it's always been a passion on my heart, and I was very fortunate that God sent me to a place where they were like-minded people.
Our congregation did not have people inside it, and so it was really an initiative from me, and with the timing of Seeds of Hope starting in the diocese, it really gave some structure to a possibility, but it was not something that I had people in the congregation or even a person who was interested. What I mentioned, that the breakfast committee gave, which was something new that started before this, but just slightly before it. So it was a brand new committee. And then we formed a committee to support the exercise classes of Zumba and yoga, and that group of people that was recruited are becoming leaders in that aspect. And so it's not something that we started with, it's something that has definitely been brought from outside.
And how's that going?
Up and down. You know, it's the exercise classes are on a hiatus right now. The attendance went down. First, before the attendance totally went down, interestingly, the attendance from members of the congregation went down and the community went up, which was both bad news and good news, because we were wanting we were wondering, how is this going to reach out to the community, and we were thrilled that it was. The sad thing was that we do have a lot of problem with obesity and diabetes and other forms of lack of health or less health in the congregation, and those folks did not stick with it as much. We've had some conflicts with the leadership in the exercise program, so that's something literally this week is part of my task. So, and I think, as I mentioned with the nutrition, it's slowly building, and I think part of that slowly building is slowly overcoming resistance, which has been the big focus, rather than just starting from scratch. It's overcoming the resistance.
Okay.
And in our congregation, we were fortunate enough to have a young lady who teaches the Zumba classes at 24-Hour Fitness and In Shape, the two spas or gyms that are up there. She teaches 7 days a week. So she is a member of our congregation. We also have a teacher in the local school district who's over the cross-country team for one of the schools in our area. And they came on board after Antelope Valley Partner for Health. I have to keep mentioning them. They sent a young man who came in and he taught Zumba. And so he's kind of a dapper-looking, handsome young guy, so all the ladies showed up in the class. And so me being the pastor that I am, I couldn't let him upstage me. So I went out and did yoga with them, passed out in front of the congregation. But I just jumped in. And it just went over very, very well. That the church saw that we were going to take it very seriously. We also went to Rick Warren. He did a course called 50 Days of Transformation, and part of it was transforming your physical bodies. And so we challenged our congregation to pick a goal for 90 days to transform the way that they treat their bodies. And I led the charge because I'm not a person who drinks water. And so I had my congregation force me to start drinking more water on a regular basis in front of them as a model to let them see that there are things that we can do, small things, to make improvements. And then as far as the nutrition portion goes, again, they came, Antelope Valley Partners Health came and taught a class on choosing your plate, on how to go with smaller portions, and learning how to cook better for ourselves.
Yeah, real quick. John Wesley put it like this, as far as leaders, some pastors were asking him how to attract people, how to grow a church or a ministry, and he said, if you set yourself on fire, people will come and watch you burn. And so for leaders, you can't stress enough setting the tone, of what you want to do. Just like anything, you can't talk about financial giving and you're not doing it yourself, or you can't talk about forgiving or anything else and you're not doing it yourself. So same token, with physical health, I think it makes a difference when pastors and when leaders are there. Sometimes it's going to come from inside of the congregation, sometimes outside. But a lot of times we don't know really who's in the congregation, or you might be shocked who's really dying to, start teaching exercise, or start teaching yoga, or start teaching Zumba. And for a leader to be able to, develop those people, whether they're from the inside or from the outside. You can help a business that's just starting, if it's someone who's not a member at all, but you want to support the community. So you got to know, who you have, and then sometimes that's just a matter of asking, who's willing to do what. But you have to have people, because the pastor cannot really maintain an exercise ministry over years, usually.
That makes me want to follow up on two very related things. The challenge is really to do them simultaneously. But one thing is the role model idea, and not just the role model, but standing up in the pulpit every Sunday morning. And I'm curious to what extent you all have connected this idea of physical health individually and in the community theologically from the pulpit, if at all, if that's a place in which you tie this all together theologically, and this idea of being a role model. If the statistic is that 2/3 of us in the U.S. are overweight or obese, that statistic is not present in this room, but then this is a health-conscious room, and it's certainly not present on this panel. But one would have to assume it's probably true of 2/3 of clergy. What is that like to encourage folks who are in your profession to stand up and take on these themes theologically, and to provide leadership in this way, if perhaps they're suffering from the same things as members of the community? That leadership role, connecting it theologically, what is, I guess, the church's unique role in this conversation around health? And then I guess the next thing I want to get back to is what Pastor Pickens got to about the essential role of church volunteers and looking for those, mining the resources of people in your congregation. But first that piece about connecting it to the theology and standing up in the pulpit.
On our 4 Sundays that are our health and wellness Sundays, we try to preach sermons, I will, or whoever is preaching that Sunday. You're challenged with the task of making it connect the body and the spirit. And we do that in a lot of different ways. One of my assistant ministers is here, and so we have a lot of very talented people who preach and teach, and so we're able to do that. So it works really well. Sometimes we will even have someone from the community speak on a health issue or a mental health issue during the pastor's word. I will give them that time to do that, and then we'll have about an hour or hour and a half after church where they do a seminar on a particular topic, and so that way it ties it in nicely. But in terms of the role modeling, I just think it's impossible to lead people somewhere you're not going. And so there are no perfect people, but you've got to be headed in the right direction. So when we had our obesity prevention initiative, there were 2 women in the church in particular who I thought would just be the first ones to raise their hand. And if they weren't the first ones to raise their hand, I thought that if I went and talked to them and with some gentle prodding, I would be able to get them to commit to the program. And they were totally against it, and they would not commit. And then I had a recent physical, and the doctor told me, well, you're just a little bit overweight for your size yourself. And so then I said, well, maybe I should be a part of the program. And I noticed that the women who were already signed up, when they found out that I was going to be a part of the program, they were pretty excited about it. And they were like, yeah, come on, Pastor. And so it really challenged me to do the best that I could do in that program, because I'm a sugar addict and I'm only sometimes reformed. So that was very difficult to me, but now they see the struggle that I have with it. And so when we'll go places, they'll say, you know, Pastor, now, you know, you're not looking at that, are you? And I would tell them, yes, I'm looking at it, so lay your hands on me and pray for me. Because I'm looking at it, and if you don't pray for me, I'm liable to touch it. So I think that you have to, that we are humans too. And I think that if you embrace your humanity, it makes you better able to lead people. Because Paul in the Bible, he asked people to look like him. When I took martial arts, my sensei would say, when he was demonstrating a form or a stance, he'd say, look like me. And I think that as clergy, we want to be able to tell our parishioners, look like me. Not that I'm perfect, but I'm pressing toward the mark.
I wish you were. I wish there were more venues to talk about health with the congregation, but Sunday morning in worship is one of the main places, or the main place, and so sermons have been a place where I've focused on it. And I don't use much Greek or Hebrew in my preaching, but one of the words that I think my congregation knows is the Greek word sozo. And sozo means both salvation and healing. And that's been one of the core things that I've tried to communicate, that salvation isn't just about going someplace after we die. Salvation, and evidenced by Jesus's practice, is mostly about healing. What he mostly did, that we see in the Gospels, was healing. So that really becomes a focus. I think one of the challenges is hope. And interesting that the organization, the Episcopal Diocese, is Seeds of Hope. Because, I mean, in terms of my being a model and example, I mean, I love to go to the yoga classes and the Zumba classes. They're much more convenient than the 24-hour fitness in Hollywood, where my membership is. So I can walk to the church and get that. But there's a sense in which there's too big a journey from where people are to where I am, because this has been a concern of mine for my whole adult life. And so I think instilling hope and making people understand, or helping people to understand, that they can hope for change, that change is something that can happen, and see people who are journeying along the way. I think that's been one of the things that's helped some folks see some people who have made some small incremental changes, and that seems like something that people can have hope for. But I think the theological focus, repeated and repeated and repeated, is something that does make a difference.
I believe it's absolutely essential that we as pastors let our congregation know that God needs healthy people to do ministry. And with that, I exemplify that by, we have an older congregation. We go to their houses, we cut their grass, we paint their rooms, we paint the outside of their house. Anything that they need assistance in doing, I believe that we, the body of Christ, as an extended family, should go there and do it. And so, my background was 29 years in law enforcement. I love to play golf. I walk the golf course. I love to play basketball, softball, and all of the above. And so I love to challenge the young men and young women in our congregation to call me out. Because I look like Willie Lump Lump, but I'm really in pretty good shape. And so it just gives me a vehicle to play with our kids. One of the things that I advocate over the pulpit, I tell everybody in my congregation I love to fly kites. I keep a kite in my back of my trunk at all times. Because the Antelope Valley is so windy, at any given point in time, you'll get a gust of wind. And so I'll break out my kite and run up and down the block, run up and down the parking lot, run up and down the street, and just start flying a kite. And what happened is I took the youth out to the park, and we bought a bunch of $2, $3 kites, and we were all out there playing. But after 15 minutes, the parents took over all the kites. And all the parents were out there running and playing, and we were having a good time. And so I emphasize to them that it's important for us to get outside and get involved in people's lives. We can do ministry and touching people where they need to be touched, hands-on, but more so, we just need to be in good health. If God calls us to go somewhere and to do something and to minister to somebody, will our health prohibit us from going?
I would just say quickly, because they covered most of what I wanted to say, but there are a lot of theological entry points, and that's something that I would challenge pastors and leaders to think about. I agree with everything that was said here as far as how it relates, and I would also add that in the community that I serve, it is about diet and exercise, but there's more to it as well. There's a definite mental health aspect that ties to physical health. The more I deal with people, the more convinced I am that some of the anger you see in the community, it has a physical effect. You know, the fear, insecurity, feeling like options are limited, you know, being overwhelmed, being frustrated, really does carry over into some physical problems. And so also it's about dealing with those, some of those core issues as well.
Well, before I go to my next question, it's something that I thought about while you were all were talking. I'm going to ask you a question, and then I want you to answer it, and then I want you to tell me whether it's a valid question, or a question that we ought to, a question that's worth or safe to discuss with our congregations. And that is this: do I have a moral obligation to be healthy? We commonly talk about the morality of if I'm not hurting anybody else, it doesn't matter. So whatever I do, as long as I'm not hurting anybody else. But if my personal choices harm my health, how does my poor health affect those around me, my family, my loved ones, my employer, my community? And if we collectively have all of this ill health and what that does to our society as a whole, we just saw earlier that folks with diabetes cost an extra $2,200 per hospital visit. Do I have a moral obligation to be healthy? And is that like the third rail of, is that a conversation we don't want to have? Go ahead, Pastor.
Okay.
Pickens' rail.
Yeah. Do you have a moral obligation to be healthy? I would say yes, because first of all, and it just depends on how you want to look at it theologically. I see it from a standpoint, two things. One, we are, you know, the body is God's temple. You know, there's that side of it, and also the side of stewardship, which is we don't own ourselves, we don't belong to ourselves. We've been given a great gift of life, and so the question is, a responsibility comes with that to care for it. At the same time, there's that side of pastoring, which is accepting people where they are, you know, not judging the culture of the congregation if you've been brought into an existing congregation, because then you're just, you know, you're fighting a battle. You'll never win anyway. So, but you have to also be, I'd even use the word prophetic and say what has to be said, but also loving people, meeting them where they are.
I believe absolutely. I am a grandparent, and my son has 2 children, but my daughter doesn't have any yet. She's 29, so I need to be around when they show up to be able to play with them and enjoy them. And also, I believe that it's incumbent upon me to be in good health, to love my wife, take care of my mom who has dementia, and if it's something were to happen to me, how will it affect my family? I think about that all the time.
I want to briefly say I'm not big on obligation, very frankly, because with adults, I don't think people respond that well to obligation. And I think if people don't come to see internally why something needs to happen and why it's beneficial for me and others, they're not going to do it, no matter how many thou shalts you send their way. And so while I think moral obligation, maybe there is one, I'm not sure it's the most helpful approach. Maybe with children, there may be some of it, but mostly I think inviting people and helping people to see why this is important for them, for their families, for their communities, for the world, and both right now and in terms of preparation for the future. So inviting rather than should.
I'll just say that I believe we have a moral obligation, but I believe it's motivated by love, not duty, but by love.
Thank you very much.